6 o'clock. A report into Unite has found the union overpaid tens of millions of pounds for a major project delivered by a building company with ties to its former boss. It's claimed ex-General Secretary Len McCluskey also enjoyed flights on private jets and football tickets arranged by the Flanagan Group. Both have been approached for comment. LBC's political editor Natasha has more.
Some really, really shocking findings in here, including a contract to drill holes in walls, which should have been charged at £90,000. Instead, the union paid more than £1.3 million for that. Unite had lent the firm £500,000, but this, according to them, was never returned. The audit also uncovered very unusual payments to the contractor, including another £500,000 advance without explanation.
A man who murdered his wife while she pushed their child in a pram has been jailed for at least 28 years. Habiba Massoum, who's 27, killed Kulsuma actor in April last year. The family of a woman whose body was found in a lake have called her a guiding light. 38-year-old Rachael Booth was reported missing in Cheshire on Saturday. And a strike by resident doctors in England will go ahead after talks failed to reach a resolution in a dispute over pay. Members are due to walk out for 5 days from Friday. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 10 points at 90.23. The pound buys $1.35 and €1.15. LBC weather: cloudy with some light rain in northwest Scotland. Isolated showers elsewhere tonight, but more frequent in southwest Wales and England. A low of 11 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. Let's start with the blindingly obvious. This isn't working. So far, nothing done by Labour ministers to stop the flow of asylum-seeking migrants across the Channel has worked. The numbers coming this year are 50% up, around 21,000 so far, and there's a record number of 109,000 people claiming asylum here in the last recorded year, more than 32,000 of them in hotel accommodation. That's all despite the smash the gangs rhetoric, the changes in the law, the deal with France, the deal with Germany, the changed tactics by the French police, and today's announcement of freezing the assets of people smugglers will have very little impact either. These are people living abroad. They don't want to come here themselves, and their assets are far beyond our control. So yes, Labour did inherit the problem, which is in part a global one, and maybe, in due course, some of these measures might start to have an impact. But so far, this is just the British state sounding self-important, even deluded, a brave little toot of the trumpet, which nobody notices. And the succession of small announcements which don't change anything is itself very dangerous politics. It seeds a growing sense that the government has lost control, doesn't really know what to do. It's not as if politicians haven't noticed the trouble that may be ahead. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, told the Cabinet earlier this week that a range of problems, including immigration and its impact on local communities, as well as technological change and deindustrialisation, was profoundly affecting society. Using more dramatic words, Nigel Farage talks about societal collapse. Meanwhile, mobs fired up on social media take the law into their own hands. I dread to think what may be coming. But it's easy for commentators to complain. What are the answers? Well, I think they begin with the introduction of compulsory ID cards for all of us, and without one, no entitlement to public services or benefits. That, plus much swifter returns. And if you think that's too harsh, well, the next stop could be forced mass deportations under another government. Meanwhile, one of this government's harshest critics is the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, who joined me in the studio a little earlier, and I began by asking him how worried he was about social cohesion after the trouble in Essex.
Well, the first thing to say is that no matter what the issue, and no matter how strongly people feel, violent protest is never justified, and I just call on anyone who's concerned about this issue not to use violence when they protest, and I'm sure the police will deal with that appropriately if it arises. But this issue is obviously very emotive. People do feel very strongly about it. I understand why they feel strongly. I feel strongly about it as well. You know, record numbers of illegal immigrants crossing the Channel. We've seen data around people having arrived here illegally, committing serious criminal offences. I think it is up to the government to take much tougher action to get this crisis under control.
But given all the pressures on the police at the moment, will they be able, do you think, to kind of fan across the country and to deal with these incidents? Because these hotels are everywhere.
Well, the government, I believe, has something like 200 of these hotels operating, despite the government's promise at the last election to end the use of asylum hotels. In fact, the number of illegal immigrants in these asylum hotels has actually gone up since the general election. But look, I do have confidence in the ability of the police to deal with any issues. But I just repeat what I said at the very beginning. There is no excuse for violent protest. And no matter how strongly people understandably and rightly feel about this, they shouldn't be using violence at any of these protests.
The number of boats coming across the channel continues to rise, or the number of people coming across the channel certainly continues to rise. Today we've had a new announcement about freezing the assets of people smugglers and banning them from travel into the UK. Do you think this will have any effect?
Andrew, this will make no difference whatsoever. These people smugglers are making millions and millions of pounds by facilitating illegal immigration. You know, they don't have assets in the UK that can be frozen. They use informal money transfer systems. The idea that this, or confiscating illegal immigrants' mobile phones, or sending a tiny number of people to France, the idea any of that is going to make the slightest difference is absurd. We all remember Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper at the time of the last election and afterwards claiming they were going to smash the gangs. Well, that was exposed as a laughable joke because, as you've said, numbers crossing have gone up, and this year so far, 2025, has been the worst year in history for illegal immigrants crossing the channel. It's gone up by 52% compared to last year, and that is because of the weak policies, the weak and ineffective policies pursued by Yvette Cooper, Keir Starmer and the Labour government.
Trying to be fair, isn't it possible that the deal with France, which does start small, it's 50 people involved every month, so it's not many, and the new deal with Germany about the boats that are being stored in Germany, the engines that are being stored in Germany, might over time pay off? In other words, it may be that it's too early to declare this is a failure yet.
Well, all of the government's previous claims, like that they were going to smash the gangs, have obviously been a failure. And the idea that sending 50 people back to France will act as a deterrent is laughable, because that amounts to only 6% of the arrivals. So that
this is meant to be a start, isn't it? These numbers are meant to go up.
They haven't even agreed the numbers with France yet, and apparently the European Union has a veto. So I'm sceptical we'll see this get off the ground at all. But at these tiny levels, it will not have a deterrent effect, because 94% of the illegal immigrants crossing can stay. Now, there is an alternative, which is to say that there should be a 100% removals deterrent, where everybody arriving illegally gets removed either to their country of origin, if possible, or to a safe third country, if not. And if everybody, or very close to everybody, gets removed upon arrival with no judicial process, then that will act as a deterrent, and very quickly people will stop attempting the crossing.
With no judicial involvement, that means getting rid of the Human Rights Act, doesn't it?
It does mean, yes, it does. It means disapplying or repealing the Human Rights Act in relation to immigration matters. That is what we should do. And in fact, I put that to a vote.
Would it also mean coming out of the European Convention on Human Rights?
Just to finish the point, I put the repeal of the Human Rights Act for immigration matters to a vote in Parliament just a few weeks ago, but Labour voted against it. It may well also involve coming out of the ECHR itself entirely. We've got one of the country's top barristers, Lord Wolfson, KC, looking at that. He'll report back in September, and we'll make an announcement at party conference. But to be clear, if we need to pull out of the ECHR to protect our country's borders, we'll do it.
I mean, let's be realistic about this. There seems to be absolutely no chance that the Labour Party would accept either of those proposals, either to pull out of the ECHR or to repeal the Human Rights Act. Given that, is there anything else they could be doing?
Well, I mean, they should be doing those things, because Keir Starmer is ultimately a weak human rights lawyer whose strings are being pulled by Lord Hermer. Keir Starmer cares more about ECHR membership than he does about controlling our borders, which, by the way, fuels the very social tension that we referred to earlier. I mean, absent that, he is reliant on, essentially, the French authorities to stop people prior to embarkation, as the Belgians have done. But so far, the French authorities have not done that.
Yet, in your time in government, when the Conservatives were in power, you wanted to do a deal with the French as well and weren't able to get one. They are doing a deal with the French. They have done a deal with the French. Isn't it possible that, like the Belgians, they will persuade the French to stop this?
Well, they have not done that so far, and they've been in office for over a year. I would say that in our last full year in office, 2023, we did get the boat numbers down by 30%, and we had a scheme a 100% removal scheme ready to go to remove people to Rwanda, but Keir Starmer cancelled that just a few days before it was due to start.
It was hugely expensive, hugely controversial, and you would have had a great deal of difficulty had you been re-elected in getting it up and running, I suspect.
Well, we had actually passed a law through Parliament, the Safety of Rwanda Act, to override a Strasbourg court judgment, to override our own Supreme Court. Yes, it was controversial, but it was also necessary to protect our borders. You mentioned the expense. Yes, it was expensive. It would have cost several £100 million. But let me point out that the current asylum system, with all these illegal immigrants entering the country, is costing not a few hundred million, it is costing billions of pounds every single year.
Isn't it possible that by taking a harder and harder line yourselves, you simply get outflanked by reform? In other words, whatever you say, they will sound tougher than you.
It's not a question of trying to outflank anyone politically. This is a really serious problem our country faces. And what we're doing as a responsible opposition is developing credible and carefully thought out solutions to fix this problem that will actually work in practice. What Reform are doing is coming up with slogans. Now, their slogans sound good, but they don't have the credibility or the detail to actually implement their policies effectively in practice. We are doing that thinking. For example, the very thoughtful work I mentioned that Lord Wolfson is doing, that will report in the next couple of months. We're doing the work properly, so when we say something, we know it's actually going to work.
So you're still here after a Conservative Party reshuffle, so congratulations for that. Are you pleased to see Sir James Cleverly back on the front bench?
Yes, I am. James is a long-standing friend of mine. We've worked together for many years in Parliament and in government. We were elected together in 2015. I've known him, I think, for 25 years. And I'm glad that he's joined the front bench team and will take the fight to this Labour government that has lost control of our borders and is crushing our economy with their appalling tax rises.
You also lost control of the borders as a party. Do you think you have to make a big apology to the country for that before they start to look seriously at the proposals that you've been talking about today?
Well, look, on illegal migration, firstly, we did get the numbers down by 30% in 2023, and we had the Rwanda plan that would have stopped the boats entirely. So I think we actually do have a good story there. On legal migration, I'm going to be honest, those numbers were far, far too high. And Kemi and I have said openly that was a big, big mistake. It should never have been allowed to happen. By
Boris Johnson.
By the Johnson government. But that should never have been allowed to happen. And we have a solution to that for the future, which is to have a legally binding cap set by Parliament, voted on by Parliament, at far, far lower levels than anything we've seen before. So when the limit is reached each month, we just stop giving out any more visas. The public want the days of mass low-skill migration to end, and we've got a plan to end them.
All right, Chris Philp, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, listening into that was Peter Walsh, an expert in UK immigration policy at the University of Oxford's Migration Observatory. Peter, thanks for joining me. Is it fair to say, as I implied, that all these relatively small or modest measures we've had from the government so far have had no real impact on the numbers?
Well, the numbers are clearly going in the wrong direction, but I also am sympathetic with your point that it may perhaps be too early to determine the Labour government's approach a failure, and that's because the core of their smash the gangs policy is currently before Parliament in the form of the Border Security Bill. We're expecting that to become law later this year. That will take a few months to bed in as well. That's what contains the counter-terror powers, the enhanced powers of seizure and arrest and investigation and so forth. And so it makes sense, I think, to allow that to bed in and then see in which direction the numbers go.
Yes, we should be cautious, but if the numbers carry on going, as you say, in the wrong direction, what about these proposals we've got from the Tories about coming out of the Human Rights Act, disapplying bits of the ECHR, and actually sending people back as soon as they arrive on the coast? Because we're at the situation where something dramatic may be needed.
It's really difficult to know what deterrent effect that might be. It is true that human rights and ECHR actually plays quite an important basis for legal challenges against removal. So if we're not bound by that, then removals would be easier. These are typically challenges on the basis of having families whilst in the UK. But putting that aside, it's not clear whether that would realise a material deterrent impact on small boat arrivals.
And what do you make of today's announcement? I was a little bit sniffy about it, I have to say, about freezing the assets of people smugglers and banning them for travel. Now, good things in principle, but again, it seems to me it's not a big enough change to actually shift the price of fish, as it were.
It's unlikely to be a game changer in my view. I mean, I must say there's a real lack of high quality evidence on what the potential impacts of smuggler sanctions might be. We also lack the operational detail required to conduct a fair evaluation of likely success or failure. But as you pointed out, one of the big challenges is that senior smuggling figures operate in countries that are far beyond jurisdictional control of the UK, and often in countries with which we have little to no law enforcement cooperation, countries like Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, and so forth. And then the other big challenge is that the financial backbone of smuggling are these informal economic money transfer systems, the Hawala system, which operates wholly outside of the formal financial system and has proven very difficult to regulate. India and Pakistan have both tried to ban that with very limited success. So there's a real challenge there too.
Final question, just update us on where we are on legal migration, because as I was hearing with the interview with Chris Philp, that has been an enormous issue, and that was something the Conservatives were really responsible for after Brexit.
Yes, this record increase, to 1.2 million immigration, 900,000 net. The last figure suggests that's down a quarter on those numbers. Of course, for policy changes that were made not by the current government, but by the previous Conservative government. The expectation is that those numbers may very well continue to fall as we see fewer visas issued for study, for work. The care route has been closed down, but we'll find out what the latest statistics are later in the summer.
We sure will. Peter Walsh of the Migration Observatory, thanks very much for joining me. Now, coming up, we're going to hear the latest from Gaza, from somebody on the ground there, and I'll be asking what more the government could be doing to help to bring to an end the awful situation there. The time now, 6:17.
LBC.
At risk.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
6:19-ish. The struggling leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch's been reshuffling her shadow cabinet this afternoon. Many of the names involved will be, frankly, news to you anyway. But she did one thing which I think was shrewd. She's brought back the man she narrowly beat for the job, Sir James Cleverly, who's going to be up against the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. Now, Cleverly is an experienced guy and a good communicator, something the Tories do need at a senior level. Let's talk to LBC's political editor, Natasha Clark. And Natasha, I think more or less in the last minute month or two, the details have come out. So fill us in.
Yeah, that's right, Andrew. And I'm just going to list a few names because, like you say, our listeners are not hugely familiar with so many of these people that are on the Tory front benches, and I don't think they'll mind.
I wasn't being rude, but it's
not
just
rude,
true.
it's just true. So James Cleverly is joining as Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. Like you say, he is the most high profile. He will be going up against Angela Rayner. And there are some Tories that privately think that maybe he might be able to show Kemi Badenoch a little bit more how it could be done at Prime Minister's questions. Just what some Tories are saying. Kevin Hollinrake is going to become the Conservative Party chairman. Neil O'Brien is going to join the Shadow Cabinet as Shadow Minister for Policy Renewal. Stewart Andrew is going to be Shadow Secretary of State for Health. And one name you might have remember from the last administration, Richard Holden coming back to the Shadow Cabinet. He has been appointed Shadow Secretary of State for Transport. Julia Lopez is going to be Shadow Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology. Like I say, lots of names that lots of our listeners won't have heard of, but this is Kemi Badenoch trying to really beef up her team. And actually, only 8 months into leadership, it's not fantastic that this is exactly where we have. A Labour source said to me earlier, it basically shows that Kemi Badenoch is already pressing the panic button and feels that her leadership is already a little bit fledgling.
Now, I wanted to go into the details of Sydney Oatcake, the MP for Grimesthorpe, but sadly we haven't got time for that because there's also a really important story involving the Unite Union. Just fill us in about that.
Yeah, it's a very complicated story. It's been going on for so long and lots of allegations flying around. But essentially, under Len McCluskey, the former Unite leader, as union leadership, essentially this very big hotel was built. It cost millions of pounds, but essentially it appears that the contractor that was involved in this case basically overinflated the value of this hotel. Unite's subsidies, fees, tens of millions of pounds has gone to seemingly a potentially corrupt contractor. The police are involved. South Wales Police are looking at this. The Serious Fraud Office, we believe, are also looking at this as well. But there's a report today out from the union which basically points the finger at the blame at Len McCluskey, says that he does know about it. And actually he received lots of freebies, including football tickets and private airfares as well.
A huge story. It's going to be all over our website tomorrow, all over the newspaper front page. I should say that Len McCluskey denies a lot of this, but everybody will be agog. Thank you very, very much indeed, Natasha. Now then, when we were discussing migrants a few moments ago, I suggested that the British state might have had an inflated sense of its own potency. And that's certainly the case when we turn to Gaza, where the killing goes on. The Gaza Health Authority, which, yes, is no doubt Hamas-controlled or influenced, says that 33 people, including 12 children, have died from malnutrition in the past 48 hours. While the United Nations Relief Agency calls the Israeli-backed private food distribution scheme there a sadistic death trap. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, a thoroughly decent man, says he is sickened by what's going on and he's threatening further actions unless there is a change in Israel's behaviour. As if that's going to happen. So far, it's all been as effective as shouting at the clouds to make the rain stop. Isn't there anything more we can be doing on arms, on trade? I don't know. Let's talk now to Emily Thornberry, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Emily, watching David Lammy being questioned about this, you could see the pain in his face. You could see the embarrassment in his face. He would love to be doing more than we're doing. Is there really more? Is there not more we can do?
I think if we take the trouble is people see the images on television and they write to their MPs and they say, well, what are you going to do about this? What can you do about this? And then the MPs go to the government and go, well, what are you going to do about this? You've got to do something about it. And we want to be able to do something, and Israel is an ally, but they don't listen to what we say.
They're completely ignoring us.
They don't listen. And that we're not used to.
Is there an element of sort of hubris here in Britain that we assume that when Britain stands up and says don't do this or do this, other countries listen? And maybe that's out of date. Maybe they just don't care about us anymore.
No, I don't think that's right. I think that on the whole, there is a point in diplomacy and in saying what you think and speaking to your friends and saying, look, speaking as a friend, I think this is the wrong thing to do. Can we help you on this? You need to find another way. There is a way out of this. Let's work on this together. That is how international politics works. Sometimes, and perhaps more these days, you get the big men who say, I don't need to listen to anyone, I can just go my own way. But I don't think that that will necessarily end well. I think it's one of the reasons why we are now working more obviously with other countries. So, so yesterday Israel was called out not just by Britain, but by Britain plus another 27, I think it was.
27 countries, that's right.
But, almost by return of post, Israel put out a statement on social media going, well, we don't agree with any of that. You're divorced from reality. We're not paying any attention to all of those countries now say.
We've tried sanctioning individuals, and that's had no effect at all. But Europe, including Britain in this case, is a huge trading partner still for Israel. Is there more we could be doing or should be doing in terms of trade embargoes?
So I think the question is actually more urgent than that. I think the question is, what are we going to do now? How do we stop these children from either starving to death or being shot? Huge numbers of people being killed in Gaza. The way in which Israel is now attacking the one area that has not been attacked until now, the humanitarian zone, where they are where they have a desalination plant, where they will be relying on it for water. Really, Israel needs to be pulled back from the brink. So I think the question is, how do we stop this?
How do we get their attention? How do we get them to listen to us? How do we get them to change?
What I would say is you have to think about where the pressure point is. So on the 27th of July, the Israeli parliament will rise. And so at that point, Netanyahu can kind of do what he wants without his government falling. So there is a golden opportunity in a way, at least in the short term, until the Israeli parliament comes back. So that may be a time when he might be persuaded to have a ceasefire without being worried that the even further right than him of his government would pull the plug on his government. So I think that is the time for Donald Trump, and it's only Donald Trump that he listens to. Remember, there were planes on the way to Iran that got turned round in the air because Donald Trump said turn the planes round. So he really is the only one that he listens to. I think Donald Trump has to be the one who says, stop now. Stop now. And you have to. There has to be a ceasefire now. And I think that the only influence that we can really have on Netanyahu is via Trump. And Trump is coming to play golf. So what I would suggest strongly is that, I appreciate that Keir Starmer has a lot of things he may want to talk to the President of the United States about, but I would ask that some of our political capital be used in asking Trump to speak to Netanyahu to get him to stop this, because we can't witness this anymore. It has to stop.
Emily Thornberry, thank you very much indeed.
Not at all.
Now, listening to that was Rachael Cummings from Save the Children, who is herself in Gaza now. Rachael, I guess the first thing I have to do is to ask you to give us an update. We've had these appalling scenes of people being shot while they're trying to get food. We know that children have been dying from malnutrition. We know that a lot of your colleagues, a lot of doctors and aid workers are also in a bad way now. Just update me.
Well, the situation is catastrophic. It's catastrophic for children. There are children dying from malnutrition, but 2 million people in Gaza are on the brink of famine. For 5 days straight in Deir al-Balah, there has been no food in the market. Now, my team, I have over 200 staff in my team. They have money in their bank accounts. They have some money in their pocket even, and yet they're unable to buy any food. The markets are completely bare. So there will be an increase in the number of children dying from malnutrition. And of course, without clean water, with the poor sanitation, the infrastructure damage, we have open sewage in the streets. Children are getting very sick very quickly, and with malnutrition, you can die very, very quickly. So yesterday, the evacuation orders in Deir al-Balah affected between 50,000, 70,000 people. And of course, there's nowhere left for people to go, and there's nowhere safe in Gaza for people. So people making impossible decisions, being, I have nowhere to go, therefore I have to stay, knowing that I am now in an evacuation area.
Rachael, I have to put to you, you know what the Israeli government say when they hear reports of the kind you've just given us. It's all Hamas-dominated. This is Hamas propaganda. You can't really believe what's going on there. We are trying to avoid any civilian casualties. There have been accidents, but no more than that. Don't listen to these people. What do you say to people listening who are genuinely agonized about what to believe?
Well, It's impossible to understand, I guess, the brutality that's being placed upon the children in Gaza. Last week, Save the Children runs temporary learning spaces in Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah. We provide some education for some children in Gaza. We know what we do is not enough. Now, last week, 5 children from our temporary learning spaces were killed in different separate airstrikes. The week before, 3 children, all of them children under 11 years old, just living their lives by their camps, by their tents with their families, killed, their lives taken away. So this is real. I see it with my own eyes. I visit the clinics. I work with the teams in the communities. Everyone in Gaza is exhausted. Everyone is visibly thin. And we see children with very, very poorly malnutrition coming to our clinics. This is very real. It's happening right in front of my eyes.
Rachael, all I can say is in a very glib, sugary way, stay safe, and thank you very much indeed for bringing us that report. Much appreciated. Thank you. Now, coming up, it's been confirmed that a 5-day doctors' strike will go ahead from Friday. I'll find out what strain that could put on an already struggling NHS. Plus, I'll hear from one of Gordon Brown's key lieutenants on the current situation the Chancellor finds herself in. But the time now is 6:31, and Amelia Cox has your news headlines.
A report into historical fraud allegations at Unite has claimed its former boss enjoyed perks paid for by a company building a major project for the union. Len McCluskey travelled using private jet and was given football tickets by the Flanagan Group. His lawyers claim he paid for them himself. Strikes by resident doctors in England are going ahead after failing to reach any agreement with the Health Secretary. Members of the British Medical Association are walking out for 5 days from Friday in a row over pay, which Wes Streeting has described as reckless. And the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee has told LBC Israel just doesn't listen after being condemned by the UK and 27 other countries. Emily Thornberry has been speaking on Tonight with Andrew Marr following a statement criticising the killing of Palestinians as they try to seek food. LBC weather: cloudy with some light rain in northwest Scotland, isolated showers elsewhere tonight, but more frequent in southwest Wales and England, a low of 11 degrees.
LBC This Morning on Nick Ferrari at Breakfast.
Israel launched substantial air raids and a ground operation targeting the area in Gaza that is the main hub for humanitarian aid and efforts. This all came a day after the highest death toll in 21 months inflicted by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, on Palestinians seeking food aid. Foreign Secretary David Lammy.
I regret hugely that I've not been able to bring this horrendous war to an end. But it's my hope that after the Knesset rises on the 28th of July, we will see the Israeli government and Hamas move to a ceasefire in August. This war has got to come to an end.
Nick Ferrari at Breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio, on Global Player, and the new LBC.
Human.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:34. Now, yesterday I was banging on about the pressure on British politics from the bond markets, and you may very well have thought, there goes old Marr again, bee in his bonnet, what does he know? Well, I say this gently, but this morning, government borrowing in June reached the second highest level since records began in 1993, more than £20 billion, numbers not seen since the worst days of the pandemic, and nearly £4 billion more than expected. And part of the reason for the extra borrowing? Well, the cost of borrowing, with interest rate payments also sky high. Borrow, and then borrow again to pay for the cost of the borrowing. And after that, you have to do it again, do it more. I fear if this isn't gripped very quickly, we're being pulled into a kind of financial whirlpool. I'm joined now by Lord Stewart, who served on Gordon Brown's Council of Economic Advisers at the Treasury and had the current Chancellor, Rachael, in front of his Economic Affairs Committee in the Lords this very afternoon. Stewart, very good of you to come in.
Nice to see you, Andrew.
Are you as concerned about how close we are to the edge with the bond markets?
I mean, there's definitely an issue here. There is an issue which is caused by the fact that growth is... Rachael Reeves a year ago would have expected growth to be stronger, interest rates to come down quicker. And she's also given herself the so-called fiscal buffer, the headroom that she's got before she starts spending more than her rules and tax revenues allow. But her buffer is very, very slim. So there's a lot of sensitivity there. So every time we have monthly figures, either on inflation, growth, or in this case, borrowing, that go against the fiscal buffer, that make that headroom even slimmer, more pressure is exerted. She can't react until the budget, it seems to me. The budget is her next moment. And I suspect the bond markets will want evidence of some serious intent, either in terms of cutting spending or raising taxes or doing something innovative around borrowing, which doesn't frighten them even more. Increasingly, it's looking like some combination of those is where she's going to have to be. But I suspect we'll still be in a sort of squeaky territory month on month until we get to the budget.
Now, she's, of course, famously made some big pledges about the taxes she isn't going to raise, like income tax and VAT. And that leaves a series of kind of smaller things, like, for instance, equalising tax on investment income as capital gains tax as compared to normal income tax. Possibly a bank levy, possibly a banking tax. Did you get any indication at all, even a kind of half wink or a half smile from her about what she might do?
She did her job very well today by saying absolutely nothing. And she made the point that the minute she says no to one of these taxes beyond the manifesto commitments that she's locked down, the minute she says no to one,
to the next one.
We assume that when she doesn't say no to the next one, she means yes. And she explained that rather well. In fact, in answer to a question from a former Chancellor, Lord Lamont, who I think wryly admitted that that's how he would have done it as well, even though he wasn't happy with her answer. So I think we're in this sort of horrible cycle for your Chancellor, where every day a newspaper or a journalist, such as yourself perhaps, puts up a new tax candidate that she might do something with. The Treasury says we don't comment, and that just allows speculation to keep going. So every day we've got another wealth tax would cost X, mansion tax would cost X, dividend tax would cost X. But I think it's more and more likely that some taxes outside, I don't think they will compromise personally the ones that they protected in the manifesto. But what that means is you're going to have to press hard on probably 2 or 3 other ones to get the kind of revenue that the fiscal moment will demand.
It is going to be a big moment. Do you think there's any chance at all that she would stand up and say, in the election, I promised not to do this, this and this? Since then, we've had Donald Trump and his tariffs. Since then, the Putin war has got worse and worse. Since then, we've had all the issues in the House of Commons. I, therefore, have to break one of those promises, but I am, an honourable person. I am going to stand down as Chancellor and let somebody else take over. And we'd all say, what a wonderful, principled, honest woman, and she'd get Britain out of that trap. Any chance of that, or is that just a kind of romantic journalistic fantasy?
I think it's a romantic journalistic fantasy, one you've clearly thought about quite a lot. I think there had been moments in the last year when, if you'd have been a Chancellor under pressure looking for more room, you could have pivoted and said, look, this is a crisis the likes of which we didn't anticipate.
And it's true, so it would have had some effect.
Actually. In fact, she's had a lot more, whether you're sympathetic to her politics or not. She has has had a lot of crises to deal with that came out of the stratosphere that she didn't anticipate. And so there could have been moments to make that pivot, to create that space. Striking that she hasn't done that, striking that at the moment she's not building a narrative of how different things have been since she took office. She's clearly still in the narrative that she inherited a slight basket case of an economy, which divides opinion whether that's true or not. But she's not preparing the ground for exactly the pivot you do. So it doesn't feel to me like she is going to do that.
Yes, there's quite narrow sort of boundaries or barriers for her on both sides, on the tax side, but also on the spending side.
That's right.
We just had those big revolts in the House of Commons, and it seems to me that she's going to try and stay within those boundaries for as long as she can.
It does. The one thing we did get out of her today, didn't get out of her, but her tone on the benefits reform was clearly she still feels that there is more work to be done in some way in terms of reining in benefits.
Because in terms of the bond markets, one of the things that people are beginning to say in the city is this may not be a government which really has a proper control over public spending. You see these huge increases in the benefits bill, particularly around sickness benefits and so on. And at some point, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are going to have to confront the Labour Party again about this.
I think there's no doubt about that. I don't think it will be on the same issue, but I think there will have to be a confrontation about some key elements of spend. The problem the government has is that they've just launched this 3-year spending plan, and so they're not set in stone, and it will be credibility damaging to revisit them so soon in the budget after you've had the 3-year plan announced just at the beginning of the summer. But I think there will have to be some fights between the government and Labour backbenchers in the next few months or a couple of years, definitely.
Kind of final question. I rather like Rachel Reeves, I have to say, as a person, but she is loathed across large parts of the Labour Party now. When she walks into the House of Commons, she knows that almost everybody in there is against her for one reason or another. She had that breakdown. She broke down in tears, famously. What did you make of her demeanour? She's quite a tough cookie in the end, I suspect, but...
She's extremely tough. She was very disciplined with her message. She wasn't going to give us any sort of extemporising or ad-libbing. I think a job of a Labour Chancellor in tough times is inevitably going to involve you becoming unpopular with your backbenchers to some extent.
And she's going to make her peace with that, maybe?
I'm not sure whether she's made a peace. I'm not sure you can ever make your peace with it. I worked for Gordon Brown, who had easier times but was still not liked by many backbenchers. It's not an easy job. It's not the job that you do to please backbenchers. But I think the payoff, if it comes, makes the pain much more worthwhile than another job. So she'll hope that she has a longer life as a Chancellor than the one you're suggesting earlier on.
And in terms of the grand strategy, it's still presumably to hope that all the investment spending, which has come in from abroad, to hope that the investment in infrastructure and so on, within a couple of years begins to pay off. And if they just kind of stay the course, grit their teeth and don't flex, then they can get through this.
It's certainly that. It's also that the reforms, which often don't get the same attention, but which today she clearly is very passionate about in terms of slimlining the planning regimes, in terms of making it easier for banks to pursue growth, in terms of making it easier for people to put their money into the equity market rather than just savings accounts. She wants those things to happen tomorrow, as soon as possible. She thinks they will change the dial. She's frustrated that Parliament's taking a long time with some of these bills because she wants them to happen tomorrow. A lot of her future reputation will hang on how successful those supply-side reforms actually are and how quickly they deliver.
Lord Wood, Stewart Wood, very interesting. Thank you so much for that. Now, it was announced this afternoon that strikes by resident doctors in England are going ahead after failing to reach any agreement with the Health Secretary. Members of the British Medical Association are going to be walking out for 5 days from Friday in a row over pay, which Wes Streeting has described as reckless. So what effect could this have on the NHS? Let's hear now from Dr. Simon Ofer, a practising GP and also the Labour MP for Stroud. Simon, very good to have you on the show again. First of all, what do you make of the confrontation between the resident doctors, we used to call them junior doctors on the one hand, and Wes on the other?
No, I think this is a really unfortunate decision because I think that resident doctors did get a pretty generous pay increase, when we first came to power, and then to come back to get more. I mean, they've been the highest paid sort of public sector worker for the last 2 years, actually, about the biggest increases in their pay anyway. So I just think it's a bit unfortunate, and I think, I don't think the BMA would lose anything just by delaying the strikes and carrying on with negotiations, which were apparently going quite well with Wes Streeting. So, I feel sad about this because I think any strike from doctors is inevitably going to harm patient care.
And they're also saying now that for senior doctors and consultants to try to cover them is going to endanger the public. What do you make of that?
I don't think that's true. So I think what we're going to do with the NHS is that always urgent care is looked after. So, if you've got a really emergency need, it will be looked after. So the public don't need to worry about that. I think what we're going to do slightly different to the Tories when there were strikes with them is that if there's an urgent, what they call elective procedure, so that's something that doesn't have to happen there and then, but needs to happen in the next few days. So whether that's a cancer operation or something like that, we're going to try and persist with those because they're the sort of things that if you delay, you get much worse outcomes. So we're trying to prioritise patient care, and I don't think that's reckless. I think that most people would agree that's a good thing to do, and try and actually minimise harm to the public from all this strike action.
I think people listening will think that is indeed very sensible. One of the ways the government wants to be judged by the public, in general, across the board, is by waiting lists. Does this strike really scupper Wes Streeting's and the government's hopes for getting waiting lists down in the course of this year and next?
I don't think it scuppers it entirely. I mean, if the strikes continue over a longer period, that will certainly really harm that, I think. And, I think that what you tend to lose in a resident doctor strike, particularly is outpatients appointment and routine surgery, like, knee or hip surgery that can sort of wait. But so those over a longer period will start to worsen, definitely. So, yeah, we really want to sort this out. And I think Wes actually has been a pretty good health secretary compared to, I remember back in the 2016 with Jeremy Hunt, he wouldn't even speak to junior doctors. Wes has gone, bent over backwards to try and sort of talk to them about other things. And I thought it was quite constructive what he was talking about in terms of there's a few bottlenecks, for example, in resident doctor training where, a number of them are trying to get through. And so he was talking
career
about
progression
career progression, and also he was talking about student loans. I mean, student doctors qualify with these enormous loans, and I think there was some talk about maybe looking at that and making that easier for resident doctors as well. I think what's not on the table is another large pay increase, simply because that's just not fair on the rest of the NHS actually.
It's very interesting, as you rightly say. I mean, he's really bent over backwards to offer this, to offer that, and he's put a lot of time into it, and he's been more or less got a slap across the face. Can you explain? There is clearly a sense of rising militancy inside the BMA over the last few years, but we're particularly noticing it at the moment. Do you know where that comes from? Are you surprised by it? Are you worried by it?
No, I don't really know. I mean, weirdly, I am a member of the BMA as well, and I know that having spoken to some junior doctors, that it's not universally supported. This, some people feel quite embarrassed by the strike, etc. I don't know where the strong militancy is. I think for a long period, I mean, for 14 years, actually, most of workers in the NHS their pay did deteriorate, and I think resident doctors did have a case in point when we first came to power a year ago. I think their pay had really deteriorated, and I think one of the problems with what Jeremy Hunt did, which was impose a deal on resident doctors, it was a really noticeable shift in attitude to resident doctors at that time. And I remember feeling, I mean, people, I was a trainer of junior doctors, and there was a change in attitude. They wouldn't stay later than their hours at that point because they felt really hard done by. So whether there's that militancy
it may well go back. Yeah, it may well go back to that. I always enjoy our conversations, Dr. Ofer. Thank you very, very much for that one. Now then, coming up, the US Justice Department has asked Ghislaine Maxwell, the longtime associate of the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein, for a meeting with its prosecutor. I'll hear from the investigative journalist who went hunting Ghislaine to hear what he makes of the latest twist in this very long-running saga. You're listening to Tonight with Andrew Marr. The time now is 6:48.
Coming up at 7, Ian Dale leading Britain's conversation. Next on LBC. This is LBC Tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:50. Ghislaine Maxwell, who's serving a 20-year jail term for crimes which include child sex trafficking, has been asked by the US Justice Department to speak to prosecutors about what she knew of Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. Now, you might think she had already spoken to prosecutors, which might be why she is serving 20 years in jail in the first place. But I guess this just goes to show that this is a story which, with President Trump under pressure still from his own supporters to release more information, just will not go away. I began by asking John Sweeney, author of Hunting Ghislaine, to remind us of the background.
Yes, so she's the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who was a monster ogre figure who ruled the Daily Mirror Group back in the 80s. He falls off his yacht in 91, almost certainly suicide, in my view, and she leaves one monster in her life, her father, who was a horrible human being to everybody, including her, and she finds a second monster, Jeffrey Epstein, and he is a paedophile. He's got a thing about 14, 15, 16-year-old girls, and she produces these girls, often they're poor, in American terms, trailer trash, and sets up a kind of industrial scale pimping.
So she's the pimp or the madam or both?
She's the madam and she's the pimp, and because her father was a horrible man to her and may possibly have even sexually abused her, certainly psychologically abused her, she's also something of a victim, and that's part of her tragedy. But the story has now moved on because she was convicted of and has got a 20-year sentence, so she's in prison. Now, what Trump said when he wasn't in power, and the MAGA base loved this conspiracy story like there's no tomorrow, was that there was a whole bunch of other paedophiles who Epstein was protecting, and he was blackmailing them, and there is a list. Now,
this list, they hope, includes lots of prominent Democrats,
yes,
and sort of liberal financiers and the people they hate in the first place.
Yes. Now, the problem with the story is that there is a kernel of truth in that Epstein was a very rich paedophile and he was a Democrat. But that's pretty much where it ends. The evidence that the feds got pointed at Ghislaine Maxwell and a very small circle around her, but she was the prime pimp. But in terms of other powerful men, there wasn't any evidence that they were talking about.
Including, we should say, Donald Trump himself, who was clearly a friend of Epstein for a while. He's, filmed with him, laughing and joking.
For a long, long time. But it's worse than that, Andrew. He wasn't just a friend. He was somebody who said that there was an interview with New York magazine, not New Yorker, in 2002, which Trump said, so Jeffrey, he likes beautiful women just as much as I do, and sometimes a little on the younger side.
So, he said that?
Yeah, in 2002. So that points to it. 2003, it's just come out. It's Epstein's 50th birthday, and Trump sends a kind of saucy kind of drawing in the form of a naked woman.
We should say he completely denies this. He says, I don't even do drawings, and this is not my words.
And he's suing the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion.
And somebody called Rupert Murdoch.
And by the way, yes, I know you. So I've been out of the country, and suddenly you're hitting me with Scottish irony, and I'm well done. Yeah, but and that's a fascinating court case because there's lots of evidence that Trump does do drawings, and the source of that, by the way, could well have been Ghislaine Maxwell, because it was she who compared the book. By the way,
we've been enjoying ourselves so much, yes, we haven't told people what the message said.
It was gosh, it was so revolting. I've switched my mind off it, but it was a
drawing of a girl.
It was a drawing of a naked woman, and it was wishing Jeffrey Epstein happy birthday. And that happened in 2003. 2004, they fall out. The big point here is that, yes, Trump did hang out with the Epsteins for a very long time, from about 92 till 2003, so more than a decade, 13 years, something like this. But they fall out But there's no evidence at all that, and Clinton was another big pal, that they actually were interested in having sex with 13, 14, 15-year-olds.
And the problem Donald Trump has, believe that, and they wonder why he's not letting it out, which is, again, perhaps why they're going back to Ghislaine Maxwell and saying, can we talk to you?
Yes, there's another complexity or another detail here, in that Maureen Comey, who was the prosecutor, and she was very, very good, and her witnesses that she produced in court were very good, and the jury convicted Ghislaine Maxwell. She resigned the other day. And it's possible the reason why she resigned was because what the Trump people want to hear is there's more dirt, serious dirt to come. And I don't think so. I think that Epstein was an evil man, but he was clever. And I do not think there is a list of blackmail victims. I don't think he worked like that.
No smoking guns, John. Thank you very much indeed. And now for something completely different. The government has signed a big deal with the company which brought us ChatGPT, OpenAI, to use much more artificial intelligence to help public services all around the UK. It'll give OpenAI access to official data, and its software will be used by schools, the security services, and in the justice system. Peter Kyle, the Technology Secretary, says that AI will now be fundamental in driving our economic growth. Now, I say it's a big deal because it sounds like a big deal, but we actually don't know any of the details, how much money is being paid over, what the privacy guarantees are, and much else besides. Let's talk, however, to LBC's technology correspondent, Will Guyatt. Will, good to see you again, albeit without your bright green spectacles, which is a disappointment. Can I ask, first of all, whether you know any more about this? You know the scale of it? Any more financial details coming out yet?
No, but it's interesting this has been announced a week or so after a deal with Google was announced. And the deal with Google, because no money changed hand, the government are basically giving Google access to a lot of government services. Everybody was up in arms saying, well, how come Google got this and nobody else got a chance to pitch for it? And the response from the government was, well, no money was changing hands, so we didn't have to have a competitive tender. But what's happening here is the government appears to be at an unparalleled level opening up everything to AI companies. If it's going, as it said, AI is going to tackle some of the country's biggest problems, they're going to need access to all the data, Andrew. And what happens with that data, like you said, we don't know. Once it's sucked up by the large language model owned by OpenAI, can OpenAI use it elsewhere? Can they sell that data and information to other people? I expect not, but there's an awful lot of hope and trust in a set of systems that are less than a couple of years old. We've seen huge amounts of problems with so-called hallucinations or mistakes when AI tools get stuff wrong. And there's also the fact that our government yet is not admitting that jobs will be lost in government and civil service as a result of these tools being employed. So there are many questions here. It's like a poor ChatGPT answer, what the government has dished out on this. They've got excited about the fact it's coming and want to show the UK getting all in on AI, but they've given us none of the important detail that people deserve.
So fair to say, in short, we deserve a franker conversation about this.
We do, and we should have it.
Will Guyatt, thank you very, very much indeed for that. Now, I will be back with you tomorrow, but if you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on both Global Player and the LBC app, where you can read and watch the latest from LBC. So download that official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Henry Riley. But right now, it's time for Ian Dale.
Thanks, Andrew. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner has entered the debate on immigration policy in an attempt to show that Labour understands the concerns that many people have about the levels of immigration in this country. But given Labour's record over the last year and that of the Tories over previous years, can either of the two main parties, although maybe I shouldn't call them that now, be trusted on immigration? On Cross Question at 8, Labour MP Natasha Irons, Jack Elson, political editor of The Sun, Baroness Arlene Foster, former First Minister of Northern Ireland, and Anne McElvoy from Politico. At 9, Brewdog are closing 10 of their biggest bars. On average, one pub shuts every week. Why is this happening, and what can be done to reverse the trend? Is it actually our fault for staying in more?
On your radio.